Then they made a little blouse out of some new blue gingham. Cousin Anne happened to have enough left over from a dress she was making. The thin material was ever so much easier to manage than the gray flannel, and they had the little garment done in no time, even to the buttons and buttonholes. When it came to making the buttonholes, Cousin Anne sat right down with each one and supervised every stitch. You may not be surprised to know that they were a great improvement over the first batch. Then, making a great ceremony of it, they began on the store material, working twice a week now, because May was slipping along very fast, and Mr. Pond might be there at any time. They knew pretty well how to go on ahead on this one, after the experience of their first pair, and Cousin Anne was not much needed except as an adviser, in hard places. She sat there in the room with them, doing sewing of her own, so quiet that half the time they forgot she was there. It was great fun, sewing all together and chatting as they sewed. A good deal of the time they talked about how splendid it was of them to be so kind to little Elias. "My, I don't believe most girls would put themselves out this way for a dirty little boy," said Stashie complacently. "No, indeed," chimed in Betsy. "It's just like a story, isn't it? Working and sacrificing for the poor. I guess he'll thank us all right for sure," said Ellen. "He'll never forget us as long as he lives, I don't suppose." Betsy, her imagination fired by this suggestion, said, "I guess when he's grown up, he'll be telling everybody about how when he was so poor and ragged, Stashie Monahan and Ellen Peters and Elizabeth Ann and Eliza," put in that little girl hastily, very much afraid she would not be given her due share of the glory. Cousin Anne sewed and listened and said nothing. Toward the end of May, 2 little blouses, 2 pairs of trousers, 2 pairs of stockings, 2 sets of underwear, contributed by the teacher, and the pair of shoes Uncle Henry gave, were ready. The little girls handled the pile of new garments with inexpressible pride, and debated just which way of bestowing them was sufficiently grand to be worthy of the occasion. Betsy was for taking them to school and giving them to Elias one by one so that each child could have her thanks separately. But Stashie wanted to take them to the house when Elias's stepfather would be there, and shame him by showing that little girls had done what he ought to have done. Cousin Anne broke into the discussion by asking in her quiet, firm voice, "What do you want Elias to know where the clothes came from?" They'd forgotten again that she was there, and turned round quickly to stare at her. Nobody could think of any answer to her very queer question. It had not occurred to anyone that there could be such a question. Cousin Anne shifted her ground and asked another, "Why did you make these clothes, anyhow?" They stared again, speechless. Why did she ask that? She knew why. Finally, little Molly said in her honest, baby way, "Why, you know, Miss Anne, so Elias Brewster will look nice, and Mr. Pond will maybe adopt him." "Well," said Cousin Anne, "what has that got to do with Liza knowing who did it?" "Why, he wouldn't know who to be grateful to," cried Betsy. "Oh," said Cousin Anne, "oh, I see. You didn't do it to help Elias. You did it to have him grateful to you. I see. Molly is such a little girl. It's no wonder she didn't really take in what you girls were up to." She nodded her head wisely as though she now understood. But if she did, little Molly certainly did not. She had not the least idea what everybody was talking about. She looked from one sober, downcast face to another, rather anxiously. What was the matter? Apparently nothing was really the matter, she decided, for after a few minutes' silence, Miss Anne got up with her usual face of cheerful gravity, and said, "Don't you think you little girls ought to top this last afternoon with a tea party? There's a new batch of cookies, and you can make yourself some lemonade if you want to." They had these refreshments out on the porch, in the sunshine, with their dolls for guests, and a great deal of chatter for sauce. Nobody said another word about how to give the clothes to Elias, till just as the girls were going away, Betsy said, walking along to the 2 older ones, "Say, don't you think it'd be fun to go some evening after dark, and leave the clothes on Elias's doorstep, and knock and run away quick before anybody comes to the door?" She spoke in an uncertain voice and smoothed Deborah's carved wooden curls. "Yes, I do," said Ellen, not looking at Betsy, but down at the weeds by the road. "I think it would be lots of fun." Little Molly, playing with Annie and Eliza, did not hear this, but she was allowed to go with the older girls on the great expedition. It was a warm, dark evening in late May, with the frogs piping their sweet, high note, and the first of the fireflies wheeling over the wet meadows near the tumble-down house where Elias lived. The girls took turns in carrying the big paper-wrapped bundle, and stole along in the shadow of the trees, full of excitement, looking over their shoulders at nothing, and pressing their hands over their mouths to keep back the giggles. There was, of course, no reason on earth why they should giggle, which is, of course, the reason why they did. If you've ever been a little girl, you know about that. One window of the small house was dimly lighted, they found, when they came in sight of it, and they thrilled with excitement and joyful alarm. Suppose Laius's dreadful stepfather should come out and yell at them! They came forward on tiptoe, making a great deal of noise by stepping on twigs, rustling bushes, crackling gravel under their feet, and doing all the other things that make such a noise at night and never do in the daytime. But nobody stirred inside the room with the lighted window. They crept forward and peeped cautiously inside, and stopped giggling. The dim light coming from a little kerosene lamp with a smoky chimney fell on a dismal, cluttered room, a bare, greasy wooden table and 2 broken-backed chairs with little Laius in one of them. He had fallen asleep with his head on his arms, his pinched, dirty, sad little figure showing in the light of the lamp. His feet dangled high above the floor in their broken, muddy shoes. One sleeve was torn to the shoulder, a piece of dry bread had dripped from his bony little hand, and a tin dipper stood beside him on a bare table. Nobody else was in the room, nor, evidently, in the darkened, empty, fireless house. As long as she lives, Betsy will never forget what she saw that night through the window. Her eyes grew very hot, and her hands very cold. Her heart thumped hard. She reached for little Molly, and gave her a great hug in the darkness. Suppose it was little Molly asleep there, all alone in the dirty, dismal house with no supper and nobody to put her to bed? She found that Ellen, next to her, was crying into the corner of her apron. Nobody said a word. Stashie, who had the bundle, walked around soberly to the front door, put it down, and knocked loudly. They all darted away noiselessly to the road, to the shadow of the trees, and waited until the door opened. A square of yellow light appeared, with Laius's figure, very small, at the bottom of it. They saw him stoop and pick up the bundle and go back into the house. Then they went quickly and silently back, separating at the crossroads with no good-night greetings. Molly and Betsy began to climb the hill to the Putney farm. It was a very warm night for May, and little Molly began to puff for breath. "Let's sit down on the rock a while and rest," she said. They were halfway up the hill now. From the rock they could see the lights in the farmhouses scattered along the valley road, and on the side of the mountain opposite them, like big stars fallen from the multitude above. Betsy lay down on the rock and looked up at the stars. After a silence, little Molly's chirping voice said, "Oh, I thought you said we were going to march up to Laius in school and give him his clothes. Did you forget about that?" Betsy gave a wriggle of shame as she remembered the plan. "No, we didn't forget it," she said. "We thought this would be a better way." "But how'll Laius know who to thank?" asked Molly. "That's no matter," said Betsy. Yes, it was Elizabeth Ann that was who said that, and meant it, too. She was not even thinking of what she was saying. Between her and the stars, thick over her in the black, soft sky, she saw again that dirty, disordered room, and the little boy, all alone, asleep with a piece of dry bread in his bony little fingers. She looked hard and long at that picture, all the time seeing the quiet stars through it, and then she turned over and hid her face on the rock. She had said her "Now I lay me" every night since she could remember, but she had never prayed till she lay there with her face on the rock, saying over and over, "Oh God, please, please, please make Mr. Pond adopt Laius."